So, hi everyone, and thanks very much. I'm filling in for Raul Alvarez, who had to cancel his talk, so I'm not going to be talking about open source ransomware. Instead, about a little side project of mine, hacking bike sharing services. So, a couple of words about myself. I'm working in InfoSec since like 2008. I've worked as a penetration tester in the past, and from that time on, I started looking differently at software. It's very interesting to a new way to play with software. And in my part-time, I also have a lot of pets, like 40,000 bees. And I'm also a lot of my time on Twitter. So the motivation to look at those bike sharing services is, on one hand, when I was working as a penetration tester, I had a look at a lot of different technologies, but often the projects were focused on web applications or on maybe some native applications, but I never had the chance to look at mobile applications closer. So this is something I had on my bucket list I wanted to do, so I needed some example of something to have a look at. And 2 years ago, when you looked at the streets, there were more and more yellow bikes or green bikes or black bikes that would come up, and it was the beginning of those companies who would, mostly startups, who would start deploy their bikes. So I got curious and downloaded an app and wanted to analyze it. But in the end, the mobile part, the analysis of the mobile application was only the smallest part, actually, of the whole thing, because it involved not only the mobile part, which is not so extensive, but also the server side parts, which are mostly REST applications, then the hardware on the bikes, like this one, which is a bike lock, and and also psychology of when you disclose vulnerabilities to the parties and the whole process of communicating with them. So how does it look like in Zurich, in my hometown? We have, I think now there's also more services deployed than these four. It all started with Smide in fall of 2016. It's a Swiss company. Then in summer of 2017, O-Bike came along. And then we had an American company called Limebike, which I haven't looked at, so it's the only one I will not be talking about in this talk. And then in May 2018, Publibike, which is another Swiss company, started also deploying their bikes. There's a little difference with Publibike, because their model is you can't just pick a bike on the street and ride it and put it anywhere you want. You need to bring it back to the station to end your ride. But apart from that, there are a lot of similarities to the other services. So, how do these services work from the user point of view? You need a smartphone. Without a smartphone, it won't work. Maybe for Publibike, there you can go with the Swiss Pass, which is actually the public transportation card. So you can just badge in with your Swiss Pass. But apart from Publibike, I think every other service require you to use your smartphone to use them. So you need to install the corresponding mobile app on your smartphone. You sign up. You need to load some credits with your credit cards. For some services, you also need to cash deposit. Like for O-Bike, I needed to pay in 130 francs. That was at the beginning, which we can think is roughly the price a bike would cost if you wouldn't bring it back. And just to let you know, I never got those 130 francs back from O-Bike. So if you're listening, I'm still waiting. So once you loaded your account with money, you can again go on, and the main screen on those apps are mainly a map, an interactive map, like a Google Maps view, where you can locate the bikes where they are in your neighborhood. And once you walked to the bike, you can start the lease, you can start riding it, and during the ride, you will be the costs will be running. And when you're done with the ride, you just log out and close the bike, and then the costs stop. So this is basically how to use such a bike sharing app. So if we look at what could go wrong with those bike apps, first of all, there are operational issues. If you take the perspective from the operator of a bike sharing app, you want to generate revenue. So you want to, in the first place, avoid that people can bypass your payment. Otherwise, well, that they can get rides for free. On the other hand, you also are concerned with availability, because if no one, even if the people are willing to pay, if the people are not technically not able to use your service, then you're also not going to fulfill your financial requirements. Then something else is you have also data protection issues. You don't wish that somebody is able to see all the personal data of your customers, so you need to make sure to protect that as well. Then there's also safety and liability issues, because people are going to use your bikes. You need to make sure that they are in a good state, so that people won't crash and maybe get injured or killed. So it's, I don't know, I haven't systematically read all the terms and conditions. I guess the people would try to, the operators would try to pull the responsibility on the user side and tell you need to make sure that the brakes are working and everything. But we'll see in one case that the users can't be held responsible for every single thing. Then in the end, you also have a business impact due to the financial loss that we talked about just before, but also you could have some reputational damage, like for instance, if you don't pay back the deposit of your customers. Okay, so let's have a look at the first bike sharing service. It's called Smide. It's based in Zurich. So as I said, they started in fall 2016. Initially, they were backed by an insurance company. And I read an interesting article about why this insurance company wanted to start that service. They were interested in the future of mobility and when like using cars, car sharing schemes, and how it would look like for the insurance. Because obviously, if you want to rent a car like that doesn't belong to you, then you need to think about how you're going to invent the new insurance schemes of the future. So it was kind of like a test bed to see how to analyze the behavior of people when they have such digital mobility with such services. In the meantime, the company Smide is independent, and I think they're doing quite well. If you look at the hardware, so that's this bike, it's produced by another Swiss company called Stromer, and they're pretty high quality bikes with a high price. So in the upper segment, they're like 6,500 francs per unit. And it's comparable to a little motorcycle because there are very powerful motors in them. They have about 400 bikes. I guess this number is pretty much higher now, because this was, I think, 2 years ago that I looked at all the bikes via the API. And how do they manage the fleet? They have actually, the bikes are totally autonomous. They have mobile connectivity, and they have a GPS inside, so the bike itself can communicate its location. This will also help for theft protection. There's one thing the operator needs to think of or needs to implement, is that these bikes have a battery. It gets, when you use it, it gets low. So you need a team of people who will do maintenance of those bikes. So you need to go to the bikes, you locate it via smartphone, you go to the bikes, you exchange batteries, you need to look for enough air pressure in the tires and everything else that could go mechanically wrong. So this is kind of like the price you need to pay for to maintain this fleet of high quality bikes. So how's the overall architecture for the operation of such a fleet? So as I already said, the bike are autonomous. They can communicate by themselves. They can have they can figure out where they are, and they will communicate their location to the backend via mobile network. On the other hand, the users also have a connection to the mobile network and to the Smite backend, and so they can meet and do the bookings and so on. So let me give you a first example of how the backend communication looks like. So this is a product of the analysis done on the mobile application. As you see, it's a totally standard REST API. So we have a GET request where you can, in this case, download the locations of the bikes. And what we get as a result is an array of records, each with a bike ID, in this case 46. Then you have in the name, it's just the license plates. So ZH is for Zurich. You have a battery level. You have a battery range, I guess in kilometers. You have the size of the bikes because they have two sizes, so I guess it's in inches. And you have a geolocalized address, as well as the latitude and longitude. Okay, so what if somebody was like, okay, it's a nice bike, I want to take it away and try to break it open. The bike have like kind of a geofence that they, first of all, you're not allowed to leave the bike or take the bike outside of the geofence. And on the other hand, if the bike is locked and you move it only from a couple of meters, and the bike has a logic that will say, okay, now I'm being taken away, and it will trigger an alert, an alarm. What it does, you don't have any lock you need to close yourself on those bikes. It has an electronic lock on the rear wheel. So actually, if you want to ride